let's go ahead and get started. What we will learn from this training. We'll do an overview of Hub requirements. We'll talk about HUBSCO Plus features, how to log into HUBSCO Plus, navigating through HUBSCO Plus, and adding formal and informal projects, and as well as running quarterly reports. And we use Chrome to access the functions of HUBSCO Plus. Although I'll say I usually use Edge, and I don't usually have a problem. So Leslie, I think that we're switching over to you on some of these. Is that correct?
Yes. So thank you, John, for the introduction. We're going to go over what is Hub. And if you look on your screen, if you receive the presentation, you'll be able to click on the blue links that'll take you directly to the statutes that we're going to review today. Per North Carolina General Statute 143-128, at least 51% of the business is owned by one or more persons who are members of at least one of the groups within that statute as stated above. The management and daily business operations must be controlled by at least one of the owners in one of the groups in the statute. So what is a hub certification categories? Those categories include the persons in the business or the ownership of the business must be Black, Hispanic, Asian American, American Indian, female, disabled, or disadvantaged. So 51% of the business must be owned by one of those persons in this particular category. Also, there's a new category. It's called ESOP, which stands for Employment Stock Ownership Plan. We'll get into that a little bit more, although the details are still trying to be finalized. That is also going to be under one of the categories very soon. Next slide, please. So hub construction requirements based on the state building. So the state building projects, 10% of the goal from state agencies, community colleges, and the public universities. This is stated in the 143-128.2 statute, as well as the local government unit in the 143-128.2. If the state funds for the building project and the cost is 100,000 plus, 10% shall be hub goal. So those categories that we spoke about in the previous slide, 10% of the hub goal will go towards this. If the cost is 300,000 plus and paid for with local funds, no state money, the goal is established by the local government. This includes projects done by a private entity on a facility to be leased or purchased by the local government. Notice and public hearing required on appropriate percentage goal for the minority participation for public projects. So all of this wording can be found in that 143-128.2. The UNC government has established a great resource on goal setting, and the guide can be found at this link here. Once again, you can click the link if you have received the actual slide deck. Next slide, please.
And if somebody is on the call who does not have the slide deck, they can go ahead and put their name and email in the chat, and we'll make sure that we get that to them.
So just a little bit about what is HUBSCO Plus. HUBSCO was developed by the North Carolina Hub Office and the North Carolina Department of Information Technology to allow local governments to have a dedicated method of providing reports on hub utilization on design and construction projects. Pretty simple. Next slide, please. What to know about construction reporting. Construction requirements, minority business participation goals, that's that 10% we spoke about earlier, public entity responsibilities, good faith efforts, and reporting. Note that minority business means hub certified. So the business must be hub certified to be able to count towards that participation goal. Projects that do not need to be reported. Prefabricated or relocatable buildings or portions thereof, except the portion of work which must be performed at the construction site, do not need to be reported. This can also be found in 143-122, 128.2. Street and utility projects are not required to be reported. So now we're going to look at what needs to be reported. This is important. This is what needs to be reported. Building projects that are 30,000 or more need to be reported. When there's reported, we're talking about the total cost. Building construction or repair projects. Per the UNC School of Government, the HUB participation in building construction, contracting, statutory requirements, and constitutional limitations building is not defined in the statute. So this, once again, this link here, you can go through there and read through all of that good information. It's very helpful to read through it because it'll help you to know exactly what you need to report and how to report it correctly. This also applies to wastewater treatment systems, wastewater collection systems, water supply systems, and water conservation projects. Applicable in grant funds or loan specify use of minority firms.
And Leslie, I have had people ask the question of, well, what's the difference between a utility project over here that we don't need to report and a utility project over here that we do need to report? Being wastewater and water collection systems, those typically are considered, utilities. But when it comes to the street and utility projects not needing to be reported, if you have a street light that you're putting in or something along those lines, so far we don't have to have reports for high-speed internet or propane lines that are running in the ground. So that's when we say utilities that don't need to be reported, those are the kinds we're talking about. The wastewater treatment and water supply systems, those are ones that we're focused on.
I have a quick question
Go ahead.
regarding the wastewater treatment. So you're saying, does it have to be related to building construction projects with wastewater, or it's just
It can, yeah, it could be the physical building that does the treatment of the water, but it can also be the pipes that you lay in the ground to get to the wastewater treatment plant. So HUBSCO Plus actually has the ability to capture linear feet as well as square feet. So square feet we would think for a building, but if you're putting, pipes in the ground, we're probably talking more about linear feet.
so any pipes that go in the ground has to be considered construction, has to be reported, correct?
If it's wastewater treatment systems or water supply systems or water conservation projects. I wouldn't say any pipe because if it might be something related to high-speed internet or something, and maybe there's a pipe related to that. I don't know for sure. But this is the wastewater treatment system, water conservation projects, water supply systems would have to be reported. Anything else, you could contact us and say, hey, I'm not sure about this. What do you think? And if it is outside of these constraints, like it's not a building, it's not wastewater treatment or water collection or water systems or water conservation projects, it will really be up to the local government to say, we think this fits and we should be following the requirements to reach out to hub vendors and do the reporting. Or they might say, you know what, no, we don't think that is something that we need to do. I think as long as you document it internally, it could be that it's an interpretation that's different from what we would say, but document whatever decision you make about whether to report or not.
The reason I ask is because we are a water treatment facility as well as a wastewater treatment. We have those functions here. Most of our construction is laying pipe or new pipe or replacing piping. So you're saying that would fall under it?
I do believe so, yes.
Thank you.
Moving on to the next slide.
All right, next slide. I just have a slight delay, so I'm sorry. Okay, construction reporting due dates. This is very important. So this information can be found on our website as well. So the next due date will be July 10th. So coming up pretty soon, almost a month from today. These dates are concrete. A lot of people like to save this on their screen so they'll know when their reports are due. We do email quarterly to all the HubSco users, as well as the dates, once again, can be found on our website. Next slide, please. This is a fun slide because we get a lot of questions about good faith efforts, and I'm pretty sure, and I'm hoping that John will jump in when needed to talk about good faith efforts. So, depending on the project size of the good faith efforts applied to the owners, the agency, school, university, college, local government, per the state construction manual on page 7, the term owner typically refers to the owning agency, capital projects coordinator, or the designee. Designers refers to the architect or engineer of the project and the companies bidding on the project. So when it comes to the informal project per statute 143-131, all public entities shall solicit minority participation in contracts for the erection, construction, alteration, or repair of any building awarded pursuant to this section, maintain a record of contracts solicited, document the efforts to recruit minority businesses' participation in those contracts, as well as report all data and documentation of efforts to recruit minority participation to the Hub office upon completion of the project. Please note that formal advertisement of bids is not required. Next slide,
And
please. Oh, sorry.
And when we're talking about informal projects, we mentioned a little bit earlier that the reporting is for projects $30,000 and up. So any project $30,000 or more falls under this, but that's $30,000 is the bottom end. The top end is a little bit fuzzy because you could start treating a project as formal earlier than what it says in the statute. So this statute went from $30,000 to $500,000, but the other statute that we're going to talk about for the formal parts starts at $300,000, and there's a piece in it that talks about $100,000. So the the concern that I have with this is that we may have folks who are not reporting projects in the $30,000 to $50,000 range. You can report lower than that if that is your choice, but I would suggest that you make it a standard. The example that we have is Department of Public Safety. They treat everything $5,000 and up as they're going to do good faith efforts to achieve hub participation, and they report everything $5,000 and up. That's an agency decision on their part. The statute does not require that of them, but it helps us understand what more hub participation is out there than if it was just going $30,000 and above. So thank you for letting me jump in. And now we're on to construction reporting good faith efforts for the more formal side.
So public owner good faith efforts for projects that cost $300,000 or above per the North Carolina General Statute 143-128.2. Before awarding a contract, a public entity shall do the following: develop and implement a hub participation outreach plan, Attend and schedule pre-bid conference. Sometimes it can be in person or virtually. Notify interested hubs about the opportunity to bid on a project at least 10 days before the bid opening. Notification must include description of the work, date, time, and location where bids are to be submitted, public entities contact person for the project, where the bid documents can be reviewed, and any special requirements for the project. Utilize other media likely to inform hubs of the opportunity to bid. So that means if you like to use it on social media, any way you can reach a large group of people to share that information about the possible bid coming up. Next slide, please.
We're going to move now into the HUBSCO Plus login. Leslie, is it okay if I take over?
Sure.
Okay. So when you log in, and I believe there is a link on our website for there is a place on our website that is all about construction reporting, and on there should be a link to HUBSCO, and you can request a new account or a new ID. You can do that a couple ways. I believe there's a form on the website. You can request that, but also if you have our contact information, and we'll put that in the chat. Roxanne, if you want to put everybody's emails in there, that would be helpful so that folks can know, hey, I have a HUBSCO Plus question. Who can I reach out to? We have a hubsco@doa.nc.gov email address that you can reach out to, that all of us can check. But if you want to, you can also reach out directly to us. So for the login, once you get to the HUBSCO link, it wants to know your user ID and your password. And if you forget your password, you can use the forgot change password link there. And there are times when you may get locked out. That happened to me earlier this week. I had to wait. If you wait like 2 hours and then come back, it should clear the lockout and should let you go in and try to log in again. So once you do log in, you'll see a HUBSCO Plus main screen, and it'll show all the informal projects that you've got open and all the formal projects that you've got open. And we do have some new features with HUBSCO Plus, in that you can search for vendors that are hub or non-hub. So pretty much everybody who is registered in the electronic vendor portal system shows up in that search. And it will auto-populate the information for those vendors. If you select them and they are an EVP, you can still enter in folks who are not an EVP if you want to, but it just means more manual data entry there. And you can switch between formal and informal projects if you need to. We used to have a system where you went in and you put in, that's your formal project. And if you came back later on and said, oh, I did that informal, but it was really informal, you would have to start a whole new project and you'd have to enter in everything again. That was a lot of time to consume if somebody made a mistake. So we now have the ability to switch back and forth if you need to. Hopefully you don't, but that capability is there in case it's needed. We do have some tips and tricks for HUBSCO Plus login, and it was designed to help with common issues that users face while logging in or forgetting their login information. And we do have that as a PDF on our website, and the link is in the slide. And we've also got our email address here, the hubsco@doa.nc.gov. Actually, I think we need to update that. I think that is not the most accurate email address. We're missing the .nc in there. So we can update that when we are after this session. Okay, so mostly,
and real quick, John, all of our emails are in the chat.
Very good. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. All right. So we talked about the waiting 2 hours. You can select forgot password, you'll receive an email notifying you of a temporary password. The recommendation is to not copy and paste that um, because there sometimes are spaces that get put into it after you paste it. So we recommend typing it in. Or yeah, so that's what we're going to recommend. Okay. So here's the HUBSCO Plus inbox, like you signed in, and the inbox will show all the projects for an entity or just the person who logged in. The main menu view displays all projects in your inbox. The informals are typically on top, and the formals are at the bottom of the screen. And if you need to see all the projects just for you, it will say show inbox for, in this case, Penny Helms. And if Penny wanted to see only her projects, she would click on that. Otherwise, she sees all the projects that are open for everybody in her organization. And you can go back and forth there. If she clicks show inbox for Penny Helms, and then it shows just her items, there will be something at the top that says show inbox for Union County Public Schools. And she click that and go back to see all the projects that everybody has done in there. You can edit or delete any of the projects shown. That edit and delete column, they're right next to each other. So be a little bit careful, but it won't delete it as soon as you click that little X over the piece of paper. It will say, are you sure you really want to delete this? And sometimes you might want to, but I would probably say most times you don't. You probably more want to edit it, or you want to work on something else. Because once it's deleted, it's gone, and you'll have to start over from scratch if you did not mean to get rid of it. HUBSCO Plus administration. So anybody who gets an email from us that says you're a system administrator for HUBSCO Plus, you have the capability of doing these things. Not everybody can do everything that a system administrator does, but there's some navigation items in HUBSCO Plus. There's on the blue tab or bar that goes across the top of the screen, there's something that says administration, projects, or report. So that's not really pointing to the next item on the list. So administration is not pointing to projects. Projects is not pointing to reports. That little triangle there is just saying that's a menu. If you hover over that, it'll let you see what's under administration. So if you hovered over administration, you'd see public entity or send email. If you have a system administrator role, you'll be able to see some additional items. If you hover over projects, you'll be able to see the main page, project inbox, search for projects, add new informal projects, add new formal projects, and the no quarterly project submittal. That only system administrators can see that no quarterly project submittal piece. So if you're a user or a reporter, and we typically just use user or system administrator as the two security features of what people can do. But if you have the system administrator part, you can indicate, hey, we had no quarterly projects submitted this quarter. So that's telling us we're paying attention. We know we need to report. We just didn't have anything to report this quarter because we have a project going on, but it's really big and it's taking a long time. And this quarter, it's not done. So that's just your way of telling us, hey, we know we have to report. We just don't have anything to report. And we do count that on our annual report that gets published publicly to say how many times each individual organization reported. It'll be from 0 to 4. So somebody could go in and say, oh, that town only reported once that year. I wonder why that was. So we also have our report tab, and there's annual quarterly reports. We'll go through what the reports are a little bit later. So the system administrator screens coming back here, hover over administration on the system screen, select public entity, and that will allow you to change items to your overall organization. And the users part over on the far right with the little people person with a lock next to it, that is who has access to HUBSCO Plus for your public entity. The part that's right under edit, that's more about the organization as a whole, but the users, it'll have information there for them. And so if you clicked on that edit part, you would be able to see this. So this is Union County Public Schools. It has basic information about the public entity, the primary contact, the responsible official. It'll have a bunch of required fields here that you have to enter in so that we know how to contact the people to say, hey, you got a report coming up, or if we got a question about anything, we can follow up with folks. And sometimes we do have questions because we do send out emails and we get bounce backs. And if we find that we don't have anybody from an entity that has, a valid email address, we're probably going to need to call and say who needs to be the contact here. Editing public entity information. So this is another part of the screen. It's like it wasn't small enough to fit on just one page. So that's 2 slides. So it asks about the Minority Business Outreach Plan and verifiable percentage goal. The real answer to this MBO, which is Minority Business Outreach Plan, developed and implemented, it should be yes for everybody, because as the statute said, for any formal project that you're doing, you need to have a Minority Business Outreach Plan. So when you're submitting this to us, know that you should have one of those. I'm not going to stop you from reporting if you don't have one of those, but you're really doing yourself a disservice to not have a plan. So it's worth investing some time to figure out how you're going to reach out to vendors in your area or statewide, or how you're going to be doing things to try to make sure that you're meeting your goal. There is the ability, the verifiable percentage goal defaults to 10%. It can be changed if there's no state funding associated with it, and the local government already has a strong basis for why they would have a different goal. There's also the ability to have goals by certification type. This is very uncommon, but it has happened in the past. So that capability is there if it's requested. But if you're only using the verifiable 10%, you don't fill out this other piece by the specific ownership categories. Let's see. The HUBSCO Plus access request form is available for entities that do not already have an account. And I think we may have a couple people on here who may not already have an account. So you would fill that out, and then we would set up an account for you. Click the user for the list of staff for HUBSCO Plus access. So we occasionally get folks saying, hey, can you update our list of people because this person retired, that person moved on, and that person has a different role. So now we have new people who need to do these. A system administrator can do that for anybody other than themselves. I've actually tried to change my own email address before, and it didn't work. I had to get somebody else who was an administrator to make the change. So we want to make sure that we're going to support anybody who reaches out to us and says, hey, can you help us with this? But you don't have to reach out to us if you are the system administrator. You have the ability to add new users, to edit existing users, or delete existing users. So the add and the edit screens are just the same. It's just that if there's somebody already there, they won't be blank. If you're adding it new, all the items will be blank. And you would choose between public entity user, which means they can go in and they can edit reports, they can add projects, they can pull reports, and that's all they can do. The public entity system administrator can do all those things. They can add reports, edit things, pull reports, but they can also manage things related to the organization and the users. So here's the no quarterly project submittal. So again, you would hover over projects, then click on no quarterly project submittal. Again, only the system administrators can do this. And once you click on no quarterly project submittal, you'll see this screen down at the bottom, and it'll say what fiscal quarter it's talking about and the year. and it'll say that in two places. You need to pay attention to that so you're not saying we don't have any projects for the wrong quarter. There's not the ability to go and select which quarter you're doing it for. So you have until 10 days after the quarter ends to say, oh, it was for quarter 3. So right now, you could go in and do it right now. I'm not recommending you do that. I'd say wait to make sure that you really don't have anything finalized for this quarter. But you have until July 10th to go in and say no projects this fiscal quarter and have it apply to quarter 4 of fiscal year 23-24. Any questions about that? It looks like we do have a couple questions in the chat. Let me stop and see about
Yep, we have a
those.
couple of questions in the chat. The first one is from Andrew. Do you have an example of a minority business outreach plan?
Don't think I have one like handy that I can just say, here's an outreach plan. We may have some from the cabinet agency perspective, and maybe we can make a note of that outreach plan to see if there's an example that we can share. And there may be some local governments that have those that they would be willing to do that. City of Greenville, Town of Cary, City of Charlotte, and Charlotte Mecklenburg schools are all very strong programs when it comes to hub participation. So it is possible that they either have an outreach plan on their website or they may be able to share that. And I'm going to make a note of that, and we might be able to follow up with those organizations and see if anybody has one that they can share with us so that we can have that as an example. Any other questions there?
Yes, Andrew also asked fiscal 4, I guess quarter 4, 2023, 22-23 is ending December or ending June?
The fiscal year is the state fiscal year, and it runs from July through June. So if I go back up to our quarterly report piece for the timing right here. So first quarter covers July through September. Second quarter covers October through December. Third quarter is January through March. And fourth quarter is April through June. And this is on our website. And if you click on that link, you'll go to the website that has this on there. So it's always available if you need it.
Okay. The next question is from Michael. So for projects over 300,000, in addition to the general contractor, the public entity needs to do direct outreach to hubs beyond advertising in HUBSCO?
Well, there's no advertising in HUBSCO. HUBSCO is just the reporting system that we're talking about today. But the Hub Office website, we do have the ability to publish opportunities there. So the items that we mentioned before, let me see if I could go back to find this. Good faith effort. So this is, yeah, so you need to develop a hub outreach plan, attend the scheduled pre-bid conference, notify interested hubs about opportunity. So there are different ways that people do this, and you can advertise. We have minority media, and we've actually got an intern who's updating that list to make sure that it's as updated as it can be, that you can advertise. And when you advertise with the Hub Office, there's no cost involved. When you advertise with the other media, likely to inform hubs of the opportunity to bid, there likely would be a cost to do that. You can have outreach events. The pre-bid conference is a great example. If you're having a pre-bid conference, notifying the hubs that want to do work, and if they're on the electronic vendor portal hub listing, then they probably want to do business if they're doing construction work. And you can search by different trades and construction codes. So reaching out to those folks and saying, hey, we've got this opportunity coming up. You don't necessarily have to reach out to just general contractors. You may want some electricians there. You may want some roofers or or other folks who are doing specific trades, even if they can't do the entire project, because they may be able to network with the other primes who are at that conference and make connections and say, hey, interested in doing this work. I'm good at doing it. I'm a hub. Maybe we could work together. So it's a good way for you to allow connections between hubs and people who would be using them.
Okay.
Hopefully that answers that question.
And we have one question from Yeek. Projects are only reported when it is finished, right?
That's a choice that you can make. You can decide to do it all at once at the end of the project, although I would not encourage it. I would encourage you to start as soon as you have any information about the project that you could actually save in HUBSCO so that it's there and you don't have to wait. Like you get to July 1 and you're like, now I got to collect all this information. Oh my gosh, where is it? But if you've done it over time, it's less stressful and you should have the information so that you can put it in and you can just go in and verify, was that right? Yep, that was right. So we'll just enter what we need to enter. It's mostly, you can choose to do it however you want to, but we recommend that you do it as the project goes along.
Okay. And the last question in this session is from Andrew. What is the difference between informal and formal projects?
Well, there's two types of informal and formal projects. There's informal bidding, which doesn't care a bit about Hub. It's just the size of the project and whether you are advertising it publicly versus just reaching out to vendors and saying, hey, would you provide some pricing for me? Informal is just the reaching out and saying, I'm going to reach out to 4 or 5 vendors and say, hey, got this project. This is basically what it's about. Can you give me a price? And they send you back a price. The formal project is you advertise it publicly, and whoever responds, and you have to go through all those responses to figure out if they're a responsive bidder, and and see which one is the lowest responsible bidder. If you're doing a single prime, then you pretty much have to go with lowest cost. But if you're doing a construction management at risk project, that's more of a qualification-based selection. So it's not, they wouldn't send you dollars on that. They would submit a proposal and you would decide who is the most qualified person to do your work. Then you negotiate on price. And CMARs, when they submit their proposals, they likely will have a hub section in there. And they may have some goals that they say, based on what we know about the area and this type of project, we think we can hit this percentage. And it may or may not be 10%. Most of the CMRs that we see are above that. But that's basically the difference between informal and formal bidding. But when it comes to hub, unfortunately, the definitions don't line up quite the same, as this is clearly an informal bidding project versus a formal bid project. The dollar values are a little bit not quite as aligned for hub versus bidding. Like I mentioned before, at least $30,000 or more, you have to seek minority participation, whether it's a new construction project, whether it's repair, or there's another term, I'm forgetting it, but you have to seek out that minority participation. And if you are not putting it out publicly and requiring the bidders to submit affidavits saying what are your good faith efforts, you are just reaching out to those vendors and saying, hey, give me a price. But you still have to document what you've done, who you reached out to, and you have to try to reach out to hub vendors. There shouldn't be an informal project where you don't have any hub vendors that you're reaching out to. For projects that are small in size, there's likely going to be hub vendors that can do the work you're looking to do unless it's incredibly specialized. And even then, we have a lot of folks who can do specialized work like abatement and things like that. Does that help? I think that dollar value piece is a little bit tough. Anything $300,000 and above, you need to do the good faith efforts for the bidder as well as the public entity good faith efforts. All right, thank you very much. All right, getting out and getting some sun, but not too much. Got to use my sunscreen. Okay, so when we're adding projects in HUBSCO Plus, and I do want to keep an eye on the time, it's 10:47, so we've got about 45 minutes left. So we'll flow through here. So HUBSCO Plus, there's usually a flow for adding projects, and this is what we recommend. You can skip around a little bit, but we think this will work better for you if you do it this way. So first off, you have to add a formal or informal project, and then you have to fill out the project main data entry screen. But then you have the ability to either go directly to the prime designer screen or skip that and go to the construction contractor screen. And you could go back to the primary designer later on. But I tend to recommend that you just go from the project main to the primary designer and to the construction contract screen. And then from there, go to contracts, construction contractors solicited directly screen. We need to update that. And then the construction contractor screen for who you're actually going to use for the contractor or subcontractor. And then there's the project view, and you finalize the project. So we would strongly recommend you follow this order as you're going through it so you don't miss anything. So adding a project, there's a couple of different ways to do it, but if you're going from your inbox, right above all your projects, there's a blue add informal, and below your and above your formal projects, there's an add formal. So you would pick the right one and select that. If it's a $30,000 project, definitely go informal. If it's 300,000 and above, you have to do formal. You might do formal for something less than $300,000 if you are requiring all the bidders to submit good faith efforts and the affidavits that go along with that. So once you add a project, and there's another way of adding a project as well from the blue report menu. It's not the report menu. I think it's from projects. You can add it there. Oh, but once you get here, there are some required fields. You got to have a project number, got to have a project name. It does not matter what it is. You just have to have one. And hopefully it's logical for you, but the Hub office does not have requirements on what those should look like. You need to know the location of the project, square footage, original project value, and if there's any state funds associated with the project. And you have the option to save the project down at the bottom, to reset, which keeps you on this page, but blanks everything out, and to cancel, which means you're not creating a project and it takes you out of this area. So the part on the left of the screen with all those blanks in there, that's before the project details are entered. But once you save the project, the piece on the right is what it looks like after you've added a project. So we've got our project number, we got a project name. This was a fake one, so it's not really very identifiable what the project is. And then we've got our notice to proceed, project completion. It calculates the duration of the project. We had a construction method that we used. Here's the location. We didn't have any square footage. We had total linear feet. So this is one of those where they were just putting pipe in the ground. And then we had the original project value. And it looked like we had not finished that yet. So we don't have any final dollar values there. Oh, by the way, we have somebody who says they love to play golf. Also, when you get to the project main view, this shows what we were just showing before of after you saved it. It shows you everything you had there. And these are kind of like Excel tabs up here. The project is the one that you're on. It's a different color than the others, but The other tabs are designers, contracts, project view, and finalized project. After saving the project, you can check the next item to go to. I would recommend you go to designers. If you have an informal project, you might not have a designer, and you can skip that and go to contracts. But if you have a formal project, you're pretty sure to have a designer, so you should be entering that in. Okay, and you can edit the project information that you made on this page just by clicking Edit Project up here and making whatever changes you need to. So searching and adding designers to formal and informal projects. As I mentioned, we would recommend after you put the project information in there, you go to designers. So you click on that designer tab up at the top, and then you would get a new window that shows up and it says add new prime designer. So you would click add new prime designer. You do not add prime designers when the construction method is design build. You don't, so don't worry about that for design build, but you click add new prime designer, and then you have the ability to click in the company name for the fields that show up. You have the ability to click in company name and type in a little bit of that about that company name and do a search. And the search feature is right down here. You don't have to enter in all this other stuff if you're doing a search. That's just if you're doing it manually, you would need to enter that in. But I would recommend doing the search first. Do the search first. And if the company that you need is on that search, you can just select them and all this stuff will populate for you. So it's less work that you have to do. So you would click search, and then it would show you this one. In this example, it's ABC Designs. We selected it, and it populated all this information. Do have to indicate the Hub certified or NCSBE certified there. Not really sure why it says all on that. That's a little odd. But if it's in the EVP database, it will be populated once you select the vendor. If no designer is found, you can select Add New Designer down at the bottom. And you would add all the information as that is requested there. So, and it will automatically say it's non-minority and source of ownership is not applicable because every hub vendor is in the EVP database. If they are not in the EVP database, they are not hub certified. So it defaults to non-minority for those. So these are all the items that you can select for these different items for type of service, discipline, method of solicitation. And once you save them, oh, go ahead.
John, this is Sarah. Real quick, when you do the search, I've noticed oftentimes there are multiple contractors that will show up. They might be the same contractor, but then there's different information about address or contact information. Is that going to be something that will be fixed down the road?
Not necessarily, because there may be different offices of a particular company. So like Barnhill, they've got offices in different parts of the state. So you would probably pick the one that is the most appropriate for the work that you did and which office did the work for you. I'm sure that there is a great guidance that I can give you beyond that.
I've seen a number where they come up even with the same address and stuff, but it's a different person.
Right.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, multiple. So yeah,
just,
they may have
just
multiple
pick the
contacts.
one that may. Okay.
Yeah, I would recommend picking the one that is the closest to what office is actually serving you. Okay. So sorry, Sarah, I was just making a note about that question. So after you click save on your new prime designer, it will show that it's a designer contract, the name of the company, the type of service, discipline, ownership category, source of ownership, method of solicitation. It will have the contract dates, the start date, end date, and it will also have the contract value and any actions that are available to you. And that's usually edit, delete, or add consultant. So editing allows you to go in here and make changes. So if you had a change order and the dollar value went up or down, you could go in here and adjust that. If you say, you know what, we actually entered in the wrong designer, we need to enter in it again, you can hit delete and it would wipe this out and you'd start again and add a new prime designer. And then you can also add consultants. So if you need somebody who's like doing some testing or site prep, like they're out there, the word is escaping me, I'm sorry, doing some surveying, then you might include them as a consultant in there. It looks, the fields look the same as the add prime designer piece, except the prime designer is already shown at the top of that. So we're not going to go through that. It looks the same as if you're adding a designer. So searching and adding construction contracts to formal contract projects. So this is, we're looking at this as a formal example, but it's very similar on the informal side. There are some slight differences in where we come up with those. I'll try to point those out. So you would click on contracts after you're done with your designers, click on contracts, and a new window will open, and you would click add new construction contract. And then you would add in the information here. This contract description ID might or might not be the same as your project name. It's not guaranteed because you might name your contract after who you are actually using. I don't know. But there's no requirement from the hub office of what that has to look like. Hopefully just logical for you. Then you have to indicate the contract method of advertisement. Did you publish it electronically? Did you publish it in a newspaper? Is it not applicable because it wasn't something that you had to publish publicly? Those are your 4 options there. And then you have the bid opening date, contract date, and then you have the notice to proceed, contract start date, and contract completion date. And when you start off, you don't necessarily have to add these dates in here, but before you finalize the project, you'll need to come back and enter in that information. Once you've entered in everything that you need to at the start of the project, you can click save, and it will show you what you entered in, and it shows here your notice to proceed and your completion date are not entered in, so eventually you'll have to go back and do those. But on the action column, you have several options. You can edit the contract, like to add in the notice to proceed date, go to contractors solicited directly, and that's required in informal contracts, informal projects, but it's not required on formal projects. If you did reach out to folks directly on a formal contract, then yes, I would say fill that out. But on formal projects, the solicited directly is optional. And then you would go to contractors used or delete contract. Again, be very careful when you're deleting the contract because anything you entered underneath the first part will get deleted. So if you entered in 2 primes and then 30 subcontractors, and you come back here and you delete this contract, all of those contractors are going to be gone, and you won't be able to get them back. So just be careful about deleting. Solicited directly. So if you solicited firms directly, you would go to contractors solicited directly. Again, this is in contracts, and you would say add new contractors solicited directly. And by solicited directly, we don't mean we had a list of 250 people and we sent an email out to all those folks. That's kind of a big, broad mass email. That's not what we would think about as directly. If you picked up the phone and called somebody and said, hey, I want you to bid on this, or you sent a personalized email to them saying, hey, Sarah, I want you to look at this and send me a quote. That's what we mean by direct contact, directly soliciting them. There are a number of required fields, firm name, address line, all that information. Uh-oh. Somebody put us on hold. Putting us on hold gives us your hold music. So hopefully people will do that. There are some required fields, and again, you can use the search feature to find the firm, and it'll populate all the information that it's got available to do that with. But then you will have to do some additional selections like primary type of work, the date you contacted them, how you contacted them, did they submit a quote, and was it a quote received? Those last two, those are optional fields, I believe. But if you received it, there's probably not a reason not to add that in there. So again, this is optional for formal projects and encouraged, but it is required for informal projects. So how to search for contractors solicited directly. This is very similar to the design search. So you would click on the company name. Whoops, I'm not actually clicking in there. Enter your search criteria. So usually just the company name. And then make a selection from the, and you click search once you enter in what you want to do. Click search, select your company. It'll populate all the information it can. And then you can either save it or cancel it, and you won't have somebody that you solicited. So hopefully that makes sense. We're going to move on to adding the contractors used. Again, this is under contracts, and you would add a new contractor under your specific contract. So going back up here to your contract page. So under contract, you would go to contractors used to get here. And you would click add new contractor. Again, add the company name in here, do a search to find them, select your vendor, and it'll populate. Or if they're not in there, it's possible they're not in there. You would just go through and manually enter all this information. And then you would click save or to move on. Prime contractor options. After adding the contractor to the project in the action column, you can either edit the contractor or add a subcontractor. And most of the times, if you're doing a formal contract, you will have a subcontractor. It's highly unlikely that a contractor doing a multi-million-dollar job will not have subcontractors. They're going to need to hire somebody else to do some of that work for them. When you add the subcontractor, it will again have the firm name come up, but it will show the prime that they're going to be under and the contract description there. So you would enter in the firm name, city, state, original contract value, contract date. Those are all the required fields on here. And you can add some of the other information as well. But again, if you type in the firm name and select it from the search that comes up, then a lot of this stuff will populate on its own. Good faith efforts are not required for subcontractors, but they are required on the prime. So that basically shows the list of options for good faith efforts from affidavit A, that list of 10 options, and you would select which ones they submitted with their bid. So they may not, it's very unlikely that they'll have selected all 10, but they may select 4 or 5, and you would just indicate which ones they selected. So once you enter in your subcontractor, you'll be able to see all the information you've entered. It'll show your prime contractor first, and then your subcontractor below them. And you can tell who's the prime versus the sub because there's a column that says tier, and the tier 0, that's the prime contractor. And if it has a 1, that means they're the subcontractor to the prime. If it says 2 in the tier, that means that firm is a sub of another subcontractor. And you can kind of see it has this little enter arrow feature here. And the more sub levels you have, the longer that arrow will be. So on this one, it's just a first tier sub of the prime, and it's a sort of a short arrow. But if it was a sub of Melissa's construction, then that arrow would be a little bit longer. And it still tells you all the information about that particular subcontractor and contractor. So eventually you'll have all the primes and subs for your project showing up in one list. And there is a project view for formal and informal projects. This feels like a good place to pause real quick to see if anybody's got any questions.
Yeah, I have a quick question. This is David again.
Yeah, hi, David.
In regards to the certifications, I noticed that statute states that we should be using minority firms, which is, Asian, Blacks, and so forth, and women. And I noticed the certifications on the hub have various certifications: DBE, SBE, SP, SF. So when we're looking for certified firms, we're only looking for, well, we should be looking for MWBE, correct?
And I specifically say hub because hub is way different than SPSF, DBE, or SBE. There are similarities, but DBE, Disadvantaged Business Enterprise, SBE through DOT, and SPF, SF, those are all federal certifications that NCDOT manages. But hub, for these purposes, is certified by our office in the Department of Administration.
And they're certified as minorities, correct? Minorities and women, correct?
We certify them. We call them hub certifications. There are categories within that certification, and it won't say minority. It'll say Black, Hispanic, Asian American, American Indian, or it'll say female, disabled, or disadvantaged. So those are our categories. If you're seeing somebody saying DBE or SPSF, that's not what counts for us. Doesn't mean they can't get certified and might not have an easy time of doing it, but they need to be hub certified in order for those dollars to count.
Okay, and so hub certified, we meet those requirements of MWBE, correct?
Well, I think you need to stop thinking about MWBE when you're talking about this. I mean, you do need, that is sort of a synonym, but hub certified is what matters. Somebody can be a hub, but not be certified. If that's the case, they might be an MBE, but their dollars won't count unless they're certified.
I'm just the terminology. I'm just trying to get the terminology correct.
Sure.
That they use in the statute. The statute says minority businesses. So
and that's why one of the first slides we had says minority equals hub, because the statute for certification, it says in there that all for this chapter, which includes 143, 128.2, minority means hub. They have to be certified under this the hub certification statute in order to be counted as minority.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah. And if anybody has a question about that, we can share that statute reference.
John?
Okay. Yeah.
This is Sarah. Just very quickly on the screen for your contractor, your prime, and it asks for the good faith effort, and you have to check which items they had checked off on that form. The issue that I ran into last quarter, which we talked about, it defaults, the screen defaults to, have they met the GFE? And it's yes or no. And so the screen automatically defaults to no. When I check yes and save it, it actually does not save to yes. And I wonder if that had been fixed or if anybody else had run into that.
I haven't heard it from other folks, Sarah. It is something that we
You-
did send to our
Okay.
to our IT folks, and I'll have to check on that.
Yeah, because the only place you see it is when you're completely ready to do it, you know, and you look at the screen when it comes back up to you, up. Then you realize, oh my gosh, I didn't check it. And
Right.
check it and it doesn't, yeah, okay.
Yeah, I'll have to look into, what the status of that is. Okay, so let me come back here. So this is the project view, and it shows all the data that you've entered. So the project view shows your project main, your designer, your um, contractors solicited directly, any good faith efforts that the prime did, as well as any subcontractors they used. And down at the bottom, it has calculations for design related and construction related. It has project totals, but when it comes to determining if you met the goal, it's really on the construction side. We don't add design and construction together to see if you met the 10% goal. That's on construction only. So just to let you know if you're new to this. And you can go back here. The kind of the purpose of this is to say, have I entered everything that I need to? Does it all look right before I try to finalize this? And you have the ability to go back and make changes. You would have to go back to your particular tab to do that. You can't go directly from here, but you would have the ability to make changes if you want to. Once you are ready and you think you've entered everything in, you would go to finalize it, and it's the last tab on the right here for the project. And if you click on finalize project, it will do a check of all the fields that are in HUBSCO Plus and see what it expects is what it expected to see, what it actually saw. And if it sees anything that it thinks are errors, it will let you know. And I can understand, especially if this is something that you're doing last minute, that this might be your most hated screen in the world because you're like, I was so close to being done and now I'm not done. But this is my favorite page because it helps me help everybody who has problems because it tells me what the page is, that main project page right here. It tells me what the field is. The problem was the final construction value. What was the value there? It's a 0. Well, the error is this field must be greater than 0 for project finalization. So you would have to go back, you would click on this link and it would take you right to that page so that you could make that change. And then once you save it, it should bring you back here and that error should go away. And you can kind of just go straight down the line there and do one error at a time. If you have multiple errors on the same page, you could address them at the same time. And then once you save that page, they should disappear from this screen. One thing that we'll note, and this came up this week, that Roxanne and I were doing some technical assistance with somebody, and when the dollar value, when you're entering that in, you only enter whole values, whole dollar values. Do not enter in, $25,000 and 49 cents. Just enter in $25,000. Or if it was $25,000.75, round that up to $25,001. And if it's 49 cents or less, round down. If it's 50 cents or more, round up. But don't put the cents in there. In the situation that we had, somebody was just putting, the dollar value and then put .00, and even that caused them problems. So don't put that decimal mark in there and add anything on after that. Whole number just means whole number. We're not looking for decimals related to that.
Hey, John,
Yes.
sorry, this is Sarah again. Related to that, because that was a problem that we had come to before, which I'm glad to hear we're just adding the whole dollars, but also the percentage of HUB, the system calculates to a decimal point but when you try and enter a decimal point in your percentage, it doesn't let you do that.
Well, the only percentage you should be entering in is your goal. So I'm not sure that I've ever run across a goal that had, like 10.5%. So
Okay, I'll show you. I'll get a specific example and send it on later.
okay.
Thanks.
Okay. Yeah, we'll take a look at that. Okay. So, and if you are having problems, we are here to help you. And probably the best way, if you're at this screen and you're just like overwhelmed by it, the best thing to do is take a screenshot of this page and email it to us. And you can email it directly to Roxanne, you can email it directly to me, or you can send it through the HUBSCO at doa.nc.gov address, and it will get to us so that we can help you out. And then we'll probably set up a Teams meeting so that we can share screens and everybody can see what each other is seeing. And that helps us to be able to say, okay, click there. I see you've done that. Now go here and enter it right there. And we can't tell you the right numbers to enter sometimes, but there are times where the numbers have to match. So you put something on the main projects page, it needs to match what you put on the construction page for the contract. So, okay. So moving on, if people have questions, that's fine. But once you've done that to finalize the project, go finalize project. And after all those errors go away, it'll give you the option to finalize the project, but it'll basically do your project view again, and you'll be able to see everything that you've got. And you may say, oh, I forgot a vendor. I need to go back and add that vendor. But if everything looks good, you can go down to the bottom and select finalize project. And there's no return from that. Once you hit it, it's going to finalize it. We have a way on our end of unfinalizing a project, but we would need to know the project number very specifically and the project name in order to do that. So that happens on occasion. It's not the end of the world if you finalize a project and then realize there was something else you had to add. So I know you probably want to be done with it at that point, but just know it's not the end of the world if you realize there's something else to add. But once you do finalize it and it accepts it, there's no errors, it will give you this screen, just this time alone. So once you close the browser, this will go away and you won't be able to see this again. And by the way, so what somebody did that we saw this week is when they got to that finalized project thing, before they finalized it, they printed out the screen that shows up, the project view basically that shows up, so that they had all the information that they were submitting. And then when they got here, they took a screenshot of this. You could print it as well. It depends if you're trying to go paperless or not, whether you want to screenshot it and save it or whatever. But it'll basically tell you the project data was submitted. Here's the project number. Here's the type of project, and the project name was this over here. And it'll say this project was submitted by this person right here on this date for this organization. And then it will have some reminders down here about keeping your documentation for a minimum of 3 years, and tell you what kinds of things you need to keep for those 3 years. So let's see. It will tell you the project data was successfully submitted. This probably is everybody's favorite screen because it means you're done. And again, you might want to take a screenshot of it. It will go away as soon as you close the browser that you have here, and then keep your documentation for 3 years. There are reports available in HUBSCO Plus. You can look at your annual and quarterly totals. You can look at your dollars per construction method and dollars per type of work. And when it asks for fiscal year, a lot of times we'll refer to it as fiscal year 22-23, and that's talking about the year 2022-2023. But it wants to know that 2023, that last part of that 2-year period there. So you have to enter it's 4 digits, and it's got to be If we were doing it for this year and I typed in 2023, I would not be getting the FY 23-24 data. I would be getting the FY 22-23 data. So you do have to be a little bit careful about that. We have actually asked if they could revise that so it's more of a drop down and you specifically select it so that it's a little bit clearer which year you're doing that with. But then you can also select which quarter you want to look at if you want to, or you can just say, I want it for the entire year, and it'll give it to you year to date. And then you can select whether you want it for design or construction. I think theoretically you can do it for both, but there's really not a reason to do that. Design and construction, they're very discrete kinds of contracts. You can also select whether it was a formal or informal type of project that you wanted to look at, and it should tell you which ones it's showing. So this is for annual quarterly reports. We pretty much just talked about this. And when you create these reports, you'll have the ability to create an Excel spreadsheet. So you could export your data into a spreadsheet if you want to. And that might help you if you're trying to keep track of things over time, and like you create your own spreadsheet that shows, a bar chart or a line graph of how you're doing. I don't know how you want to use it, but that's one way that you might use it. Okay, and you can see construction or design related information. You can also do construction dollars by type of work. So concrete, conveying systems, electrical, furnishings, general contracting, special construction. It depends on what you selected for your prime contractor's type of work. But you can create a report on that as well. And you can do it by date as well. You have to have a beginning date and an end date, I believe. And then we've also got some HUBSCO resources. And if you're a new user, you can request access here. If you forget your login ID, here's your hubsco@doa.nc.gov. That email address you can send to us. Here's the link to HUBSCO Plus itself. And there's a bunch of training resources down here. Just a little quick welcome to HUBSCO Plus. There's some information specifically about informal project training. There's a checklist so you can see what fields it's going to ask you for, depending on if it's a formal or informal project. I think that is a very helpful thing, especially if you've never done it before. So you can kind of go through and collect all the documentation that you know you're going to need so you can have that information. It's not the report, but it's to help you as you're going through the report to know that you've got the information you need. And there's also some information in there about construction requirements. It goes a little bit more into detail on like the public entity good faith efforts. And then there's also an example of what some good faith efforts might look like in terms of documentation. If they select different items on the affidavit A, what would you expect documentation to look like for that? And then we also have our HUB annual and detailed reports and our HUB construction expenditure reporting on our website. And you can see going back as far as we have data electronically, which I think is the year 2000. You can see how your organization has done. And if you don't show up on that report, it means you don't have an account and that you need to get one so that you can do reporting. Let's see. Somebody, looks like Jennifer was asking, do you have a recommendation of what to utilize as the project number? And David just said we use the calendar year as the first two digits and then count from there. For example, 24-001, 24-002, 24-003. So that's one way that you can do it. The Hub office doesn't really have a recommendation on how you number those things. We just want to make sure that it's logical for you, and that if somebody else had to come along and finish entering data that you started, that they'd be able to find the project that you were referencing. If it's just something that you made up in your head, that's not going to help somebody coming along who would need to do it if you're on vacation or something like that. And we know through our experience with the pandemic that there were times that people um, who were doing the data entry, they were too sick to do the data entry, or we actually had some people pass away that they were no longer able to do that. So it's good to keep documentation where other people can have access to it. You may want to restrict who has access to it, but make sure it's not just you. Make sure somebody else can come behind you and enter in what is needed and find the information that they need.